I've been here ever since. I did do 2 years in Johannesburg when I was working here. But I'm a Durban boy, through and through, love being on the coast. And in terms of work aspirations, I'm a civil engineer. Then I did an MBA and then I did a PhD in development economics. And finally, I stopped using my qualifications. I'm just a normal businessman. So I don't think studying helped me much from an earning point of view. But it certainly helped me to be able to analyze things. I stay with my brother and his wife and kids in Amsterdam. Live a very comfortable life. And I travel, well, prior to COVID, I generally traveled twice a year overseas, at least once a year to India. And the other trip is generally somewhere else in the world.
Yeah. And maybe we'll come explore that a little bit more. And could you tell us, how do you come around to writing? Have you always been interested? Has it always been a dream? Firstly, maybe, is this your first book or have there been others?
It is my first book. I've written personal books for family, but this is my first commercial book. I've always been a very voracious reader. Growing up in Stanger in the 70s and 80s, the only sort of access to entertainment was either reading or sport. And although I'm a big-sized guy, I was not very sporty, so I ended up reading a lot. So my mum took me to the municipal library when I was about 5 years old. And I started to look at pictures in storybooks without being able to read, and then I started to read on my own without sort of having any formal person teaching me. So I don't know whether I picked it up through osmosis or what. In terms, I think, as I grew older, I started to read more and more voraciously. By the time I was 8 years old, it was the typical Hardy Boys and Nancy Drews and stuff. And later on, where I really got into reading was when it went into the classics. I love like your Thomas Hardy and your Charles Dickens. Those were the real writers, because that was the only form of real entertainment back then. And books were so sweeping and so epic, the way they tied those tales together. So that was my formative years. And I think when we started studying literature in Standard 6, which is grade 8 now, so you develop a different kind of love for literature at that point. You start to analyze it, and you look at plots and themes and get a feel for what it is like to be a writer, to be able to craft something like this. But when I wrote the book, I wrote it in 2006. It was 1,200 pages in 3 months. I was working for the city of Durban. I became a whistleblower about some stuff that was not very kosher at the city. Unfortunately, the person who I sort of laid the complaint against was much more powerful than me, so I ended up being suspended. So I was made to earn a salary, and I sat in my office, and after a week, I thought I was going to go mad. So I said, look, what do? I'm earning my salary. I can't look at the walls from 8 to 5 every day. And I said, let me just start writing a book. And I didn't have any map or anything in my head. I just started typing it out. And then, like I said, I completed it in 3 months, and it took me 16 years to bring it down, edit it down to 400 pages from the 1,200.
Never waste a good crisis.
Exactly. Turn a lemon into a lemonade.
There you go. And you mentioned all these authors, and that there came a time when you got into real literature, as you put it. Would you say that those have influenced your writing in any way?
To be honest, I think yes, the classics did, because my book is fairly long. It's about 400 pages. For a debut author, it's quite a long book, especially in South Africa. I'm not a person who likes novellas and short story. Okay, there is a space for it, but every book has to have a bit of meat about it. For you to get to understand or to love a book, you've got to love the character or hate it, whatever it is. but you're going to have to feel some sort of emotion about the character. So the classics gave you that. You know, when you start thinking about Charles Dickens writing Great Expectations and about Philip, or his shortened name was Pip. If you think about To Kill a Mockingbird, I think her name was Scout. You start to love these characters. And sometimes you start to hate the negative characters. But a true reader develops an emotional connection with the protagonist, whether he's positive or negative.
So you feel that there needs to be that depth in the character.
Exactly.
And as a consequence, the book does end up getting a bit of...
You have to. There has to be, for me, there has to be a build-up. I know there's a market for short stories, but it just doesn't engage me as much.
Yeah. And it's different strokes for different folks, right?
Yes.
And so how did this book, maybe the question really more is, can you just tell us about the story in Dalliance with Destiny? Is it a true story? Is it fiction? Is it part autobiographical? Is it totally made up?
No, it's definitely not autobiographical. My life was not exciting enough to be put into a book, in my opinion. I think every writer, when he's writing a piece of fiction, he takes a little bit out of his own life, but he doesn't unpack it truthfully. You got to put it on steroids. You got to hype it up. Otherwise, what happens in life, or what people do in spoken conversation, is not as exciting when you write it out and people read it. So you got to put it on steroids. So there are incidents that I may have taken from what I've seen, but they're not a true reflection of the incident, if you get what I mean.
Yeah.
So it's not biographical, autobiographical.
And so can you take us, and it's 400 pages long, so it's clearly a meaty story.
Yeah.
Can you take us through the plot? What is the story about?
So the term that's used for my novel, the theme, is something new that I learned. It's called a Bildungsroman. A Bildungsroman in literary circles means a coming-of-age tale, a seeking for an identity kind of thing. So typical examples of that include Great Expectations, where you watch the character grow, not just physically, but he grows mentally and spiritually as well. And then if you look at, like I said, To Kill a Mockingbird, that's another example. A lot of Dickens' tales, David Copperfield and so forth, were typical Bildungsroman books. Another example of Bildungsroman, I'm just thinking, was The Summer of '69. Not many people are familiar with that book, but, and then there's the famous one in America. It's not coming to mind at the moment, but it was the last book read by the gentleman who killed Kennedy in 1969. Catch in the Rye, that was the book. Yeah, so these coming-of-age tales, I think, besides the fact that the reader learns, besides the fact that the protagonist learns, it's also the reader who learns along with him. And you open up your mind. Now, my tale is about a character. He's not very likable. He's very brash. He's living in South Africa, and he's going through a series of incidents where he can't understand why is he undergoing this incidents. So in the end, he gets these signs that he needs to just go to India, and he takes it up because he needs to look for salvation. So he goes to India, traveling through the various cities. He's looking for love, a bit of amour. It's a bit raunchy in parts. Actually, it's very raunchy at times. I won't go into the details. I don't think there's any kids here, but there's a lot of raunchy parts in it. And he's traveling up the Ganges, going through the ancestral villages of his ancestors. And he's just looking for an identity because, at the end of the day, we are descendants of immigrants. And we sometimes wonder where we belong. So this is the conundrum facing the character. And, it has romance, it has tragedy, it has comedy, it has history. I had to bring a lot of history because, when you're a writer in South Africa, in as much as we think South Africa is well known throughout the world because of Nelson Mandela, the truth is, if I have to say, I was driving in my car down West Street, somebody in America is not going to understand what's this West Street he's talking about. But if we read a novel about a guy in New York and he says, I was taking a walk down Park Avenue, straight away you'll picture Manhattan as a South African you can picture it. So South Africa is not well known in that way. So I had to put a series of prologues to speak about the 1949 riots, to speak about the immigration of Indians to the indenture to South Africa. But these are just a series of introductions to give an international audience a feel for the setting in South Africa, because they really don't understand the history.
And I think for an author to be sensitive to that and address it is helpful. Yesterday we had a launch of a book, and a member of the book club asked the author, we were stuck in this one line of your story in the book club, can you unpack it for us here? So I think that it's always helpful to the reader when you can provide that context so they can better take in the material.
But that's why it's so thick.
Right. And it gets controversial in parts. Can you talk to us about that? And was it deliberate? Are you deliberately provoking people, provoking discussion, or is it just incidental?
I don't think it was deliberate. Look, on my social media handles, I use the term, I call myself agent provocateur, so I do provoke by nature. But it's not to be bad, I do provoke people to get them to think. My issue with South Africa is that we're not an intellectual society. As much as we want to think we are, what have we only invented? We invented the creepy trolley. There's nothing else we invented. If you look at the crowd here, compared to Jaipur's literary festival, I can see about probably 5 or 6 people in front who are listening to me. That's not an issue for me. For my launch, I had 300 people. But the Jaipur Literary Festival gets about 100,000 people a day to come to the festival. And Jaipur is smaller than Durban. So the problem in South Africa is we don't have an intellectually minded grouping cutting across all places who are interested in reading. Because reading is not in vogue anymore. People want to, look for other forms of entertainment that's going to give you, immediate gratification. Whether it's a computer game, whether it's going to social media where people are responding, in the next second. It's gratifying, but it's not helping you with your creativity. And that's the problem that we are facing. And if you ask me, I think South Africa, the kids, compared to my generation, yes, they're doing well academically, but in terms of being built for life, I don't think they have it. I mean, I think about myself when I applied it to go to university. I did it. But now I hear about kids and their parents are helping them prepare application forms, and I'm thinking, what the hell happened here? An 18-year-old does not know how to fill out an application form from university. So they have become a lot less resilient, and it breaks my heart. I mean, the organizers have put so much of effort into doing something, to arranging a function such as this, an event. But the turnout has not been grand at all, and there's been a lot of marketing. So I can't blame the organizers. It's just the way we are, the times that we're living in, because reading is not in vogue, and I hope it changes.
Well, Durban does have a rather poor reputation when it comes to the arts, doesn't it? Lots of international events miss us, and lots of international artists don't bother coming to Durban. They'll go to Johannesburg, and they'll go to Cape Town, and then they'll go back home. And part of the thrust, or part of the wish of the Durban International Book Fair is to ignite that passion for the arts through perhaps the literary form. But I hear what you're saying. There are so many sub-themes that I think we could explore. And I'm going to give members of the audience the opportunity to ask any questions in a moment. But I was thinking, you mentioned identity. And I think woven into this whole discussion that we've had up to now is the issue of identity. Perhaps even just our identity as a people, what we treasure, what we hold dear. For you, in what way has the book, if at all, been insightful, perhaps about your own identity, about you? What has it revealed, if anything, of yourself to you?
I think I went through a range of emotions when I was writing. I'm lucky in the sense that I never had writer's block. I don't need to plan what I'm writing. As I write each word, the next word came, which is something that I learned from a guy called Paul Bunyan, who wrote Pilgrim's Progress. He said the same thing. As he wrote, the next word came. And the same thing happened for me, or as I typed rather than I wrote. You go through a series of emotions, and I realized at where I was very gung-ho in the beginning, there was also a lot of anxiety that I was not aware of, because my book is polemic. There's a lot of controversy. And it is not done deliberately. It goes in with the plot. But I was nervous as to how the public is going to really feel about it, especially Durban. Durban is very backwater. You would like to think we're this modern city, but the fact is, if you look at the crowd, we're not integrated. The races do not support each other. If you go compare to Johannesburg and Cape Town, there's no integration. Durban is the most segregated of the three cities. We the least intellectual. Like you said, they don't have a feeling for the arts. And it's sad because we have a fantastic quality of life. But we just have a very bad rap. So I think I've become a lot more cynical as I was writing, where I never used to be.
And how do you think we could change that? What are your thoughts?
Well, I think you guys are doing an excellent sort of job of trying to bring people into the arts field. I mean, a lot of effort went into it. But, it's almost like you're taking your head and you're banging it against a brick wall. Because, like I said, if you look at the people here, most of them are probably in their 50s or 60s who've been coming, unless it's the school kids who came because you all arranged that. Now, when I was 18 years old, if I had heard there was an author coming to speak, which was never really happened in my time, I would have been there in a jiffy. But where are those 18-year-olds? Where are those university kids? They're not here. Where are they? So that spirit of inquiry is not there, it's lacking. Yes, they become one track in terms of academia, but where's that spirit to fly, that free will? It's lacking. And I hope you guys succeed and prove me wrong.
Thank you. We'll certainly give it our best shot. Is there anybody that's got a question for our author, a comment, or a point of view?
Yes.
There's Kula. Do we have a mic, Vernon? Vernon. Thank you, Vernon.
Alan, well done, congratulations.
Thank you.
I've read bits and pieces of your Alliance with Destiny, and I picked up this character called Milan Gansham. I think you've done a sterling job there in creating this hype about Milan and his travels into India and how he explores the territorial to his advantage and his disadvantage. What I do want to know is that, look, as a writer, also as a first-time writer, I'm not very authoritative in speaking on the subject, but just an observation from my experiences and the short-lived experiences is that what were you thinking? I understand you did say that you didn't have writer's block, but I just want to explore that territory a little more with your eloquence, in the sense that surely when you are writing, like me, I had the same experience or a similar experience, where when I was writing, whether I wrote a sentence, whether I wrote a paragraph, always threw myself into the reader out there, and I'd visualize the reader as to how it's Boo or Aman or whoever else reads my work, actually receive my work. So to me this was not intriguing, but I think it was a challenge that I faced at the time where I put my little finger on the typo. So this for me I think is an experience that I can share with you as a writer. Perhaps you've got better thoughts on that, and maybe you can sort of expound on that for me. Over and above that, I'd just like to say congratulations, thank you very much. Despite the little bit of ifs and buts that we've had, or the negativities that flow around here, we did have a very good interaction in that I had opportunity of meeting people like yourselves. I had an opportunity of meeting some great authors, great budding authors as well. And I think this is the type of forum that gives us an opportunity to interact with people. Yes, we may not take a lot away from here, but at least maybe one or two lines that would actually resonate and will make us grow in our thinking for the way forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ghulam, for those words. I appreciate them. I have your book, which I bought from you last week, which I will be going through from next week onwards. Ghulam, I'm just going to be egotistical rather than bear false modesties and say I thought about the reader when I was writing. I didn't. I just wrote for myself. I was indulgent. A couple times the keys on my keyboard broke because I typed very hard and I get very passionate about it. Sometimes the letters on the keyboard disappeared because I typed so much. You know, they say everyone has some sort of unique talent that they're born with. One would have thought me being so tall, I would have been a good sportsman, but I wasn't. And I discovered I was a good writer. I think we started writing compositions in standard 3 or something. And teachers started taking my compositions and reading them out during assembly and stuff like that. So I can't use myself as a benchmark to tell you how to approach this. All I'm saying is, forget about the fears. Yes, we're living in Durban. People are going to judge you. You can't stop people judging you, but don't let it stop you from writing. And yes, it's going to be controversial. You know, there are in my book. There's so many raunchy scenes, but it was not put in deliberately because I'm trying to sell it. This is not my bread and butter. I'm a civil engineer. I own a few businesses. So, and writers, let's face it, they don't make money unless you win a Booker Prize or you're writing pulp fiction like Sidney Sheldon and so forth. So if you love writing, if you find it cathartic, just do it. Don't allow yourself to be hemmed in by any negative thoughts. Nothing is going to happen. There's nothing negative.
Wonderful. And the bell has rung twice.
Yeah. And
that tells us that our time is up. I actually would have loved to hear more about the title of the book. Kiru, you've got a question?
I'm sorry to contest with the chair once you...
I know.
You've
we'll
run...
take it up with you.
Yeah, but I just couldn't contain myself. I think that this has been an exhibition of astounding arrogance, and seldom have I heard any author on a stage with this kind of attitude to both audiences and writing, and I can't contain myself. Just the sheer anger I have at this. I haven't looked at the book, and now I'm really grateful I haven't. Because, you know, when we come to book fairs, the idea is to have intellectual exchanges and not chastise audiences who may or may not be here. And this is a vibrant city. These are vibrant reading people. And I don't know where you get it from to assume all kinds of things about people who read or do not read. Maybe it's a commentary on the fact that you might not have the sort of appeal that you think you have, that there are no people to listen to you. And, you know, I just struggled to contain myself. I had to go and get a few deep breaths and Yeah, I just wondered, I should maybe have stood up and said, Spore, throw this asshole out of the door here, because this kind of idiotic thing, let alone at a book fair, we should never tolerate. And I don't think this kind of assessment of audiences and what we have going on the city is any close to the sort of assessment he's made. And so just, pardon me, Anivesh, you put a great deal of effort into organizing this, but I don't know how this kind of slimy line of thought could have slipped onto the program. So forgive me for venting in this way, but I certainly won't tolerate this kind of utter nonsense. And Ilan, you might have wonderful things to say about this, but if you heard more carefully the sort of lines that were being thrown at us in the city, I think you might want to reconsider the recommendations that you put about this work. And yeah, I would say just get out of the book fair. Thanks.
Thank you for that. You're most welcome to your opinions. Whether I respect them or not is a different thing, but I appreciate your honesty.
And we appreciate yours. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, we are done, and it remains for me to thank you for taking the time to come and join us here.
Appreciate it.
Come and join us here this evening.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.